read this, and actually, the speaker yesterday talked about it. It's between 92 and 95% of all candidates across the country win who have the most money.
Yeah.
The ones who have the most money win. And I have a chart that shows how much money Obama already has compared to Mitt Romney. It dwarfs Romney's money, no matter how rich he is. And the man who has the most money will win.
That's an absolute fact. In fact, Obama has raised more money from Wall Street than all the other Republican candidates combined. That's why it's not a choice. It's not a choice. Obama doesn't represent us. That's a joke. Obama is a mascot for the same forces that run the Republican Party. There's not a real choice here. And I would say there's not a real choice in the city. And at the end of the day, they're going to hold on to power, right, for as long and as hard as they can. And it's up to us to take it back. They stole that power from us. In fact, there's a great article in the New York Times when the state of Tennessee had a constitutional convention to abolish slavery. There was a man here who ran a newspaper called the Chattanooga Gazette. And he went up there and he had this wonderful speech that was printed in the New York Times where he basically said that he was sick and tired of hearing white pastors speaking from the pulpit about how they were doing such a great thing by emancipating the slaves. And he was tired of white politicians acting like they were so great and they were doing something so wonderful when it was never theirs to give. Right? They took that power away from other people and then they act like they're so great and they're so nice when they gave it back. Right? And that's the kind of system that we're up against, right? Is any time that we're given any little bit of a choice, they're told us to be grateful for it. And what we need to do is we need to start demanding more things, right? I mean, Frederick Douglass, one of the great abolitionists, said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And so it's up to us to be able to convince one another that we need to start demanding more. We need to demand more from the media to inform us, to keep us, actually educated about these issues. We need to demand more from our politicians who supposedly represent us, to actually fulfill their obligations and to come and talk to us and to know our concerns and to try to actually act on our shared values.
Anyone else want to talk about these things?
How do we do that? How can we make a change?
There's a lot of ways you can make change. If you guys are going to be journalists, you got to break that sound barrier. You got to stop going to the politicians, the people who know so little about so much, and go to the people who are directly affected by decisions. If they're going to talk about public housing and demolishing public housing, don't go to the Chattanooga Housing Authority. Go to the people who live there. That's their homes, right? We got to give a voice to the voiceless. We got to take marginalized and oppressed groups of society, and we got to give them an opportunity to speak and to be heard, right? Another thing is that we've got to stand in solidarity with other people in their struggles, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in our state right now and in our city. We've got a lot of problems with, for example, this crazy right-wing bigoted anti-immigration stuff coming through, or the heterosexist stuff coming through. I mean, one of our local representatives recently said that if he saw a transgendered individual going into a changing room, he would stomp a mud hole in them, right? It's just, that person should be run out of town on a freaking rail, tarred and feathered. So we got to work with each other.
Oh, no, just with the Volkswagen, I never thought about that for the people who do I would guess you would say lower class, who don't have the opportunity to go to Volkswagen and get a job. I would have thought the same way they rework the road, that they would rework the transportation system where they're able to get in and out, and because many of them don't have transportation.
Yeah.
And it was a perfect example today. I was going to Buffalo Wild Wing, and I saw like a whole bunch of people at the bus stop right down the street. And I'm like, gosh, that's a lot of people for the buses, but they can only go within that vicinity. Now, if they want to get out of it, they have to ask somebody who has a car, and probably their neighbor or the person down the street doesn't have transportation, so they're stuck within those
Absolutely.
four walls. It's unfortunate.
You're absolutely right. There's a great article in the Times Free Press about that. It was actually part of the deal of Volkswagen coming here, was that they had to provide transportation to Enterprise South, where they're located, public transportation. And then they decided, like they've so often done, that they weren't going to uphold their contractual end. And the mayor said, well, that's cool. And I think this just goes to the idea of priorities. All these things around us, the primary conditions for our lives, the quality of the air we breathe, the quality of the water we drink, right? Public transportation, housing, education, the right to access to food, which is a big issue in our city. Those are broad social choices. They're decisions. You can actually go back to individuals who are making them. And those individuals aren't acting on the right priorities, in my opinion. They're not reflecting the values that I have, right? Because the values I have say that we need to try to gear society as much as possible to look after the people that are the most vulnerable, who need the most. And that, at the end of the day, was not at all what came out of the recall, I bet, when you read it. That viewpoint, that's what we were concerned about. Instead, what you heard was a bunch of crazy white dudes who were really angry and waving Gadsden flags, like the "don't tread on me" stuff, because it fit an easier national narrative. It didn't fit the complexities of human beings who were actually engaging in what we were doing.
Any other comments?
Going back to the Billy Long thing, it's almost comical. Like, it's something you'd see in a Hollywood movie, is what he was doing here. And nobody hardly knows about what he did. Like, and it was like 3 years ago that he got arrested, I think. And,
2010.
yeah, and everybody is like, who's that? Because it didn't get any, it like hit the 6 o'clock news once. And after that, nobody heard about it anymore.
Yeah. 2010, Tennessee was rated the most corrupt state in the country by the Daily Beast. That's a fact. Yeah, that's something to be proud of, right? Yeah, that's our state, right? That's how we roll here.
Does anyone else want to argue with him or bring up a point that you don't agree with this? Or you have a relative that's a politician here or anything else?
I just don't get why, when the ruling was that it was gonna go to a vote, like a while ago, that it was so late. Like, it wasn't like 30, 60 days after, it was like 5 months.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question.
Chris, would you repeat the question?
So she was asking, like, why in the city charter it actually states that once the petitions for the recall are certified, the election is supposed to be within 30 to 60 days. And that actually gets to the heart of the legal battle that's taking place, is that there's Tennessee state law that kind of provides the channel by which cities can do a recall, right? And there's the city law. And the city law says something different from the state law, and the state law will trump it, except where the state law says that the city has kind of the room to make its own decisions for itself, right? So the city says one thing, but the state law says another. The state law said it had to be at the next general election, and state law supersedes the city law. It's really complex, but that's the thing, is this stuff's never been done before, really, in Chattanooga. So it's a lot of new territory for the legal system. It's new territory for the political system. And I can tell you that it scares the hell out of people in power to know that we, the people, the population, can all of a sudden have any sort of say in what's actually happening, right? That's what they're scared of. And that's what the newspapers are protecting, because the newspapers at the end of the day here, I believe, protect people in power. They're not there to look after you and me.
I'd like to explain just a little bit here this semester. My husband came home, and he has a PhD. He's a really, really smart guy, and he's kind of liberal. He's from England. He's on the radio. You might have heard him. He's the British guy on WTC. And he came home one day muttering about this horrible recall and how it was ruining our city. And I was sitting there at my computer, and I was trying to work, and he was going on and on about, this is terrible. We have this recall, and it's hurting our reputation. It's so terrible for Chattanooga. And finally, I just put my stuff up, and I said, where did you find out about this? And he said, he sees it story after story in Chattanooga. He reads it religiously every day. And Harry Austin is a liberal. He's the editorial. He's on the editorial page. He's an unbelievable leftist, and he is against your organization. So I said to Richard, finally, I told him there's a whole other side of this you don't even know, because I knew Megan. Megan's a former student of mine, a friend of mine, and she told me about it because I wouldn't have known otherwise. But then I said, I love Chattanooga. Chattanooga is, I think, the coolest city. Do y'all like it? It's just the coolest, most beautiful, hip city. It's starting to be something really special. And isn't it wonderful that we have activism in our city? I think it's a badge of honor for a city to have citizens who are engaged, not something to be ashamed of. It's like, wow, I think I'd like to move to that city because people care about what's going on, instead of just sitting back and letting the powers that be.
I totally agree with you. I mean, so we take so much pride in being a gig city, bringing Volkswagen and things like that. what I would prioritize, my vision for the city is I'd love to be the most democratic city in the country. What would that look like? What would it mean for every one of us to be responsible for our own community, but to recognize that our responsibility comes from a web of interconnectedness? Right? That was the vision of Dr. King. And that's the vision, I think, of all the great prophets that we've ever had in the United States. So why isn't that something that we push for? You know, why isn't that brought up as a discussion? And it's going to be up to us to make it, because that's something that you can learn from Ralph Abernathy, the man who wrote with Dr. King. He said you can't ever. I'm gonna have to paraphrase this. You can't do something about something until you can first bring attention to it, right? I mean, like, how are you ever expecting an issue to be addressed if you can't even get people to know that there's an issue, right? So, and that's kind of the important parts of it, because the channels of democracy and the channels of discourse are so narrow in our city, in our state, and our country. And so we're not provided a full spectrum of the complexity of human life and what people are actually doing. So it's up to us to build relationships and to try to change that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Yeah, so we've got a few websites. This is our organization's website, chataction.org. And you can get up to date on all sorts of stuff that we're engaged in. We're engaged in a lot of public housing fights right now. Now, I actually do my own personal media, my own personal journalism, my own personal take on what is happening. And you can find really in-depth, I think, toot my own horn, analysis about some of the issues that I'm most concerned about locally at my blog, which is chactivist.blogspot.com.
How do you make your money these days?
So we are a nonprofit organization that is membership run. We do not receive money from major corporations or from the government or from large foundations. So if anybody would ever like to come out and contribute to our organization in a lot of different ways, financially, through your volunteer time, mentally, physically, whatever, you can feel free to do that through our website and get in contact with us, or you can contact me personally. My email address is chris.brooks@chataction.org, which is just the same as that. So,
And if you're a reporter, you should call it and get some stories. That'd be cool.
absolutely.
You need some stories for some of your classes, wouldn't that be great? Great, you probably has a lot of information. Thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you for having me.